Good everything.
Yes, good everything. Good everything, Dr. Carr. Yes, don't weep.
Professor Hunter, oh Mary, don't you weep. Or weep, but that's your son after all. And some of y'all gonna see this. We're here in New and Good Friday, and I guess he'll be in the ground by the time many other people see it on the YouTube side. So, what was it? 3 days they say.
3 days.
Then
Yeah.
he is a riz. Powerful metaphors.
He is risen.
Yes, indeed. Well, you going to Easter Sunday?
No,
No.
I live Easter Sunday.
Hmm.
I've I've, uh, I've come to a reckoning with the pomp and circumstance of religion.
Hmm.
Made a conscious decision to live Jesus.
Ah.
So
Okay. Okay.
it's my choice. My choice. I'd rather live the life than to
Ah.
celebrate it. Just me personally. You do what you want, but
Well, yeah. There's that. I mean, the Howard Thurman observation really resonates. I think for a lot of people, myself included, we can't understand the mystery of creation. So all the stories we make up have equal weight. So rather than fight about which magic words we use to access an attempt to understand reality, we simply should just resolve the fact that however we came into the world and how we were brought up and whatever choices we make in the wake of that are as valid as the others, as long as we don't harm anything or anybody. So we certainly see Aretha. And I think if you go back into our archive, if you have access to the bibliography, to the compendium, it would be session 110, which was on Easter and the real Jack Roosevelt Robinson. In the bibliography, that's page 1305. But if you don't have access to it, you can go look that up. That'll be on New York channel on Karen Hunter YouTube page. You can see the conversation, and we talk about how Aretha Franklin there in that live recording, that double album that she recorded there with James Cleveland and that live choir, how she conflates the narratives. She got
Dr. Black just talked about that on the show recently, about how the choir can oftentimes be in conflict with the pulpit, and how we used the choir or that other pulpit to tell a deeper story of our humanity and our Africanness um,
Mhm.
through the voice. But yeah, no, and let me just tell people also, you can look up In Class with Carr podcast, because I've been
Oh, okay.
stuff. I've been doing stuff.
Oh, okay. We got a podcast. Where is it? On
Yeah,
all the places people get
every
paid.
person can get your podcast. So
Really?
yes, if you just type in
Okay.
In Class with Carr podcast, what episode is that?
110.
110. You can find that and listen.
Excellent. Oh, that's good. Okay, good. Access then. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. I remember when Baba Omo and Dr. Black came in and Alzheimer's was talking about that. Yeah, I mean, you see it. You see and it's interesting because to think about that through an Africana lens, whether you talk about I don't even know if I would call it conflict as much as almost, he's a musician, so he would,
Maybe I'm using the wrong words. Maybe it's
no,
not
no, no,
even.
no, no. He said conflict.
Okay. Okay.
But I think conflict is the right word now, because the Western concept of the minister or the preacher, which is a perversion of the idea of someone being an influence, a leader, which you see in a lot of ways of knowing and cultural meaning making. Contrast that to someone being the bottleneck, the choke point. In other words, you can't get to God except through me, which is a central anchoring tenet of European Christianity as it emerges in Catholicism. You got to come talk to me, then I'll talk to God for you. It's like, that ain't how it works. And Ifa, the priest, is like, I don't know what the creator or what the Orisha have for you, but you came to me for advice. I threw these calories, and this is the story I was said to told, and that's between you and the creator. It's a much more example for the Europeans. Come pay me this money, and I'll go talk to God. And if you got no coin, you should just stay out of my box. I'll take your confession another day when I'm feeling charitable. But again, charity, where does the even concept come from? But anyway, I'm saying it to say, in this day and age, yeah, the preacher's preaching one thing, the choir gets everybody to sing, which is again very African. If you are in the space, you must sing. There's nobody, if you can't sing, you must move. Everybody's in it. For a preacher, it's different. and Aretha Franklin in that song, and that I wouldn't call it performance. Again, I want to use a social structure rendering, but in a moment of cultural meaning making, she remixes that movement in memory. She brings from her text, I suppose you can call it. She talks about Lazarus, which brings in another element. She's got the New Testament with "Oh Mary, don't you weep," tell Martha not to moan, and then goes all the way back to the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, into Exodus, Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea, which is, of course, one of the greatest crimes ever committed against African people in terms of historical memory, because that did not happen. But using the metaphor in reality, we'll see that in summer. We'll go to Egypt. But in the metaphor, it is a resonant chord because it's about an oppressed people who are going to rely on something that overflows their circumstances to liberate themselves. So she combines Jesus with Moses, but she starts with Jesus. And then, of course, the Jesus and Moses that she's combining are filtered through the women. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, the mother of God, which at least the Catholics, taking from the Egyptians, got right when they understand Holy Mary, mother of God. They understood that part. But, you know, they got some lessons. Others, they mix with their thing. But that's all I'm saying is just to say that at the end of the day, we do the best we can to make meaning in this short period we have walking on top of the earth. And this is a season for renewal. You know, that was placed here because again, the Romans, the Catholics grafted this onto pre-existing rituals in that part of the world we now call Europe. They wouldn't call themselves Europeans. But the Lupercal, the Feast of the Lupercal, you know, all those festivals, feasts, the equinox festivals, we're in the season of rebirth and renewal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As I was in my garden this morning planting some calla lilies. Let me say this. Can I just say, first of all, and we got this feedback. So
let's go.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you mute because I want to say this. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for this renewal that we have here in this space. Would not be possible without you. And yes, we are all doing it, but this is what it looks like to show up in your full self. And you love us with the kind of love that I haven't seen anywhere. So I want to say thank you as we are going into a new birth. I'm spending a lot of time in the lab figuring out, and we're going to figure it out because that's what I do. We're going to figure it out how to bring all of the works that you have into one place so that you can do what you do best, which is to catalog and think about how these stories must be thrown into the future and how we can preserve our knowledge. And this community is unlike anything I've ever been a part of. And it couldn't have existed if not for Adjua, bringing you up that day, but if not for a pandemic, if not for the questions and the curiosity, if not for the knowledge. So we're all doing our part. This week, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Cheryl LaRoche, and I book people weeks in advance, months in advance, and I did not connect her to the book that you held up. So like people would just come in, and I almost canceled her because I was having this great conversation with Otis Moss. I didn't know Otis Moss III. We were grooving. And I was like, Smiz, maybe we should. And I was like, all right, bring her in. We're talking about the Underground Railroad. It didn't even cross my mind is my point. This is what I'm talking about, the alignment that we're in. And as she's talking, I was like, hey, this sounds familiar. The man on the horse, Dr. Carr. And then it's like clicking. And then Otis Moss is excited. I'm excited. And she's excited because she says, I never get to talk. When people invite me on, I can't have this conversation because most people can't even ask the questions. Okay, so thank you for that.
No, with pleasure. And that's the genius of it, isn't it? The questions and then opening people up because, Cheryl has spent her adult life doing that work and tracing that. And so for y'all to be talking about the Underground Railroad and then for her to come in with the example of the man through the AME church that set it up in the Midwest. I mean, that's not accident. That's divine order. And that's not Christian or Muslim. That's not Ifa or Vodun. That's not Kadomble or Obia. That is the spirituality that we exist in. The thing we can't name, but we know. Yes. That's divine order, as the Egyptians would say. Yeah, that is absolutely divine order. And that's the way it works. And we give ourselves, we know that. I mean, we know it, but we don't trust it. And it's sad because when I say we, I don't even just mean as African people. I mean, so many humans do trust it, but those who are the farthest away from it, because the cultures that they have been developed, because of the traumas that they've experienced. And I'm thinking now primarily about Europeans, but not exclusively. I mean, when you're in austere circumstances, you just don't trust that. I mean, the older I get, the more I study and listen, the more I think we should probably never have migrated up and got trapped in that ice, because this is what happens when you are assaulted. It's a natural reaction. So, but at any rate, that's neither here
No,
nor
but
there.
it is here and there. There was a video somebody posted. This man brought his child to the Universal Soul Circus. This man has no melanin. His wife has no melanin. So he wanted to expose his little one to something outside of their, because, it is natural in this country to self-segregate, particularly when you don't have melanin. So 75% of people self-segregate. So they don't have any relationship. Their knowledge, their understanding of other cultures comes through media, and media is going to tell you we're all criminals. We're all, degenerates, we're drug addicts, we're thieves, we're all of these things. And then sometimes our entertainment reinforces it. But when you live in community, and his video was like, I can't believe that we were so welcome. It was so beautiful. I want my child to have this for the rest of his life, to be in this. And so Universal Circus centers Africans, but it doesn't exclude anyone. It's not saying whites only, blacks only. It's not telling you you're less than. It's saying, come on in and get all of this goodness and all of these seasonings and beautiful music and culture, because it is your culture too. Ultimately, if you knew who you were, to your point, Dr. Carr, this is the work that you do, letting us remember. And that spiritual thing, I'm riding it.
Me too. Me too.
Wheels fall off.
Oh, me too. We're both riding it. We're all riding it. We must all ride it. If we don't, well, we don't. We know what happens. This is where we find ourselves on the verge of potential nuclear war. But even that is a process, as we were talking about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month now. This whole question of we exist in a universe, and in a moment, our awareness can change everything we think we know. That's why ways of knowing rather than philosophy or religion, ways of knowing rather than belief. No, they're all ways of knowing. How do we know? And how do we think we know what we know? We were talking yesterday in Financial Times, which doesn't publish a print edition on Good Friday, so-called Good Friday. Clive Cookson wrote an article, and everybody's covering it now. They've named this ball that is a couple of times bigger than Earth, K2-18b. It's covered with water, they think. It's a couple trillion miles from Earth, and they're saying that they think they found signs of biological activity. Now, what does that do to the faith? Don't get caught up, because your whole world could change immediately. The more you know, it shouldn't shake the fact that it doesn't matter if there are things that look like us scattered across places we'll never go. We're all connected. Whatever that is, we're connected to it, because whatever it is that animated everything, we are it. We are literally it. We're not gonna go looking for God. We look in the mirror. We're all connected to it, and it makes it very difficult, because at the center of all Western religions is fear. I don't want to stop being able to wiggle fingers. I can't imagine worms eating me, and I don't breathe no more. See, you done go off into the wrong thing. That awful day will surely come, but guess what? It ain't awful. Daddy Kelsey always talks about that. I mean, he's had almost in a month and a half or so, he's gonna be a century old on top of the earth. But he says, you talking about death, you don't die. There's always change and transformation. What you holding on to is the fear. don't. I mean, I think about that. When old gospel song, you say, "Must Jesus bear the cross alone, and all the world go free?" The answer is yes, because people could say, "No, there's a cross for everyone, and there's a cross for me." That's also yes. Why? Why are you waiting on? Why you got to call Jesus? Jesus paid his price. You know what I'm saying? The police killed Jesus, waited a few centuries, and turned around and made him their man. Can you imagine that? It's like these are the guys that killed Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Metaphorically, we don't know whether it happened in that, but we know that something happened that but at the heart of whatever happened whatever the actors were, we know that one thing is for sure: sacrifice. Except it really wasn't sacrifice. If you believe, if you know, not even believe, then you understand that that wasn't a sacrifice. I already know what's going to happen next. I'm trying to say, y'all, I want you to understand. You know what I'm saying? I'm good. Oh, man, I tell you. It's today the day that I guess Rev Moss would, this is the day they preached the 7 last words.
Child,
Wait a minute, hold on. Where are Nubia people at? I know Rev Wingard in here, Rev Wright.
Yo, I do not know.
Yeah, I think what is it? Into thy hands I commend, into your hands I commend my spirit. Yeah, I think that's the 7 last words, right? He gave up the ghost and he died. There it is. I mean, that's the 7 last words of Christ. But the speech endures. Must Jesus bear the cross alone? We used to sing that song and mean it. Must Jesus bear the cross alone? Well, it was only one cross. You know, Simon Cyrenian got in there, which of course reminds us last week being Paul Robeson's birthday that he played Simon the Cyrenian, and everybody went crazy because you got this big black dude carrying this cross across the stage, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, wait, yeah, is that he was the black? No, they were all black. That's what messed your mind up, Pete Hexes. But we understand your Christianity requires somebody else's death, and that means it's no Christianity at all. You're not Christians. Now you can keep calling yourselves Christians, but I'm gonna give up the politeness of calling these people Christians because you want somebody to die. I'm gonna give up the politeness of calling them Jews either, because quite frankly, the biggest anti-Semites in the United States of America are the people that call themselves conservative Christians, because they want the Jews to die so Jesus can come back. So let's just stop. My thing is, let's just call it what it is. You should say what you say with your whole chest. Quit playing in the faces of the world, and that goes for the Muslims too that want other people to die. That goes for the murderers of the Israeli Defense Force, who, as we are right here now, are killing other people, all y'all. And anybody who says that they're against peace, you're an enemy of yourself too. Because Du Bois and Robeson, Essie and Shirley Graham, Du Bois, they lost their passports not because they were trying to kill somebody. They lost their passports because they were for peace. And so, I think about that in the context of something that was written in today's Financial Times by the historian and philosopher, the Israeli historian and philosopher. Let me see, can I pull it up here? Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote a piece. Like I said, they didn't print Financial Times. They don't print the Financial Times of London on Good Friday. It's amazing the grip that this society is still in when it comes to the idea of Easter. And by this society, I mean Christian societies, which is very interesting. Of course, this is also Passover season. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Then it's Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea, as Reverend Wright always reminds us, maybe the Reed Sea, if you look at the metaphor. But again, the Egyptians and the Israelis, so it is Passover season. But in today's Financial Times, the digital edition, Yuval Noah Harari wrote a piece called Trump's World of Rival Fortresses. It's very interesting. He says the surprising thing about Donald Trump's policies is that people are still surprised by them. Headlines express shock and disbelief whenever Trump assaults another pillar of the global liberal order. For example, by supporting Russia's claims for Ukrainian territory, contemplating the forced annexation of Greenland, or unleashing financial chaos with his tariff announcements. Yet his policies are so consistent and his vision of the world so clearly defined that by this stage, only willful self-deception can account for any surprise. And of course, that was nothing big. But as I continued to read, something very interesting struck me as he was writing. Harari makes a distinction between what he calls liberal societies and what he calls zero-sum societies, or what he calls mosaic of fortresses. Let me just set the metaphor, and then we'll continue, because this week, as we are convened, what I've been thinking about a lot this week is the question of how we achieve liberation beyond the nation state, beyond the nation, beyond the country. And instead of fighting back, which is what we're all reacting now, we're reacting these executive orders. He's tweeting from the toilet 3 o'clock in the morning. No, fighting black. We're going to center ourselves, continue to center ourselves today. But Harari, as I was reading the article in the wee hours this morning, they released it about 4 o'clock Friday morning. It's like, wow, this is very interesting. He says he's making a distinction, as I said, Harari, between liberal order and what he calls the mosaic of fortresses. He says supporters of the liberal order, this is using our African studies framework, will go to the social structure question. Who are Africans to others, or what is the arrangement, the global arrangement, the local or even country level arrangement in which people are living, people, particularly people of African descent. So in that category, when we talk about liberals and conservatives, that's where that language comes from. It's not language generated from inside African communities. These are frameworks that we then use and populate with meaning without ever asking whether we should even be using that language, except in Africana studies, which we're not going to do that. So he says supporters of the liberal order see the world as a potentially win-win network of cooperation. They believe that conflict is not inevitable because cooperation can be mutually beneficial. This belief has deep philosophical roots. Liberals argue that all humans share some common experiences and interests, which can form the basis for universal values, global institutions, and international laws. For example, all humans abhor illness and have a common interest in preventing the spread of contagious diseases. Yes, all except maybe Bobby Kennedy Jr. But at any rate, so all countries would benefit from the sharing of medical knowledge, global efforts to eradicate epidemics, and the establishment of institutions like the World Health Organization that coordinate such efforts. Similarly, when liberals look at the flow of ideas, goods, and people between countries, they tend to understand it in terms of potential mutual benefits rather than inevitable competition and exploitation. Now, we could quibble about and should discuss, maybe we'll talk about some in office hours. Folks come in on Monday night and we'll have our continuing conversation, which is getting richer and richer. Come back to Monday's conversation in a minute. We could talk about what that means in terms of how he is characterizing the liberal order, how Yuval Noah Harari is contributing, because there's some questions to raise in terms of if that's how the liberal order works. Certainly in the last 500 years of settler colonialism, because at the center of that vision, Harari would no doubt place so-called Western societies and Western civilizations, warts and all. And of course, at that point, we would have to say, nah, chief, nah, you're not going to do that. But let's just stipulate, as they would say in the law, let's just accept that broad framing of liberal concepts. Cooperation, human beings coming together. Every movie everybody has ever seen, when there's a global level catastrophic event, a meteor coming in or the floods coming, and then the world all of a sudden cooperates, or the aliens are going to attack, and now all the people put aside racial differences, differences of country and language, and say we're going to come together. So cooperation, the liberal order. He then says, he asks the question, what then is Trump's preferred alternative? If he could reshape the world according to his wishes, what would it look like? Harari writes, Trump's ideal is a mosaic of fortresses, where countries are separated by high financial, military, cultural, and physical walls. It foregoes the potential of mutually beneficial cooperation, but Trump and like-minded populists argue that it will offer countries more stability and peace. Why is that? Well, let me read this next paragraph, then we'll go into the comparison and then bring it to where we want to bring it today in terms of this question of overflowing these boundaries and thinking about fighting black, liberation beyond the nation state. He goes on and says, there is, of course, a key component missing from this vision, this Trumpian vision. Thousands of years of history teach us that each fortress would probably want a bit more security, a bit more prosperity, a bit more territory for itself, shout out to Greenland and the Panama Canal, at the expense of its neighbors. We're talking about a nation-state framework, really. He says, in the absence of universal values, global institutions, and international laws, how would rival fortresses resolve their disputes? Trump's solution is simple. The way to prevent conflicts is for the weak to do whatever the strong demand. Think about that in terms of assimilation when you're talking inside the country's borders, and domination if you're talking about outside the country's borders. Remember that. We're going to come back to that in a minute. The question of assimilation. Trump's solution is simple, he writes again. The way to prevent conflicts is for the weak to do whatever the strong demand. According to this view, conflict only occurs when the weak refuse to accept reality. War is therefore always the fault of the weak. Think about what the clown has been saying about the Ukraine, for example. And Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine. It's being reported now that the clown's errand boy, little Marco, is saying that the clown told him to tell the world that he's going to get out of the talks between Russia and Ukraine if there's no progress made. Bulletin, those aren't talks. You want them to give up part of their territory. But it's all pursuant to the idea that it's their territory to begin with. And that framework of fortresses is basically what Harari is describing, including Israel, quite frankly, is the theory of the last half millennia or so. And reaching back before that, theories of empire building. The strong take the weak. Now let's play big bank, take little bank. But what I thought about as I was reading it this morning is in all these movies we see, what was that movie, 2012 or 2022, whatever that movie was, where the axis of the world shifted and the oceans overflowed the continents, and Chiwetel Ejiofor played the scientist, you know, with that perpetual look of stress and anxiety that he has on his face in every movie he has. He's looking for, you know, and I think John Cusack was in it. And so as they're building these arcs, all these different places are building arcs. People are bidding. The rich get arcs. Everybody else got a lottery, and they're fighting to be on the arcs. And at one point, one of the arcs breaks down, and who shows up to rescue our intrepid band of heroes that we've been taught to cheer for? The Chinese. The Chinese got an arc too. Everybody building an arc. They could have shot them. They could have left them in the water. They could have left them to drown as the waters rose, but they didn't. And they allowed everybody to come on to the ark and say, very interesting. They're taking people, right? But these movies always show the generosity. But the villains are the ones, like they had a Russian guy who had bought his way on, and the villains are always the ones who are selfish. So in today's parlance, social structure parlance, who would be the villains in these movies? That would be Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. That would be Donald Trump. That would be Little Marco. That would be doggone Christy Nome. You know, that would be y'all the villains. But you prepare yourself as the heroes because you have this metaphor that Harari is talking about, this mosaic of fortresses, where the stronger countries, financially, militarily, culturally, physically, absorb the weaker ones. But here's the point. If you are in the United States, if you're going to be part of inside the wall, if you're going to be part of the mosaic of fortresses, if you're going to be part of the U.S. fortress, which doesn't have that muscle anymore, as the Chinese, as they begin to continue to break the economic stranglehold the United States has had on the world system for the last not quite 100 years, but, you know, post-World War II. Well, if you're going to be inside those national borders of the United States of America, you have to assimilate. This is what Kevin Roberts talks about every time he went somewhere selling this book that nobody read and claimed they did, called Mandate for Leadership Project 2025. When they asked him, could this be a violent revolution y'all trying to have? He says, no, not if the left, again, social structure terms, not unless the left chooses for it not to be. In other words, we're strong, you're weak, but they see cooperation as weakness. Even though they use the language of cooperation, what they see as strength is their financial, military, cultural, physical dominance. Cultural, what does that mean? We're all here. We all don't have the same culture. Save the rhetorical gesture notwithstanding, until Monday night, we could talk about it. There's no American culture. There is the imposition of totems and shrines and rituals and icons, and there is the quiet in the street that we all cosplay in order for people to leave us alone. I am thoroughly convinced by 60 years on the planet of listening and observation and participation that most Africans in the United States of America wave that flag, not because they believe in it, but because they see it as a totem that will make you leave us alone. And I'd like to be convinced otherwise, because that would mean that I missed something and I always want to know more. But what I'm saying is the assimilation that Kevin Roberts is talking about in Project 2025 that they want to put on everybody else, that is accompanied by subjugation and subordination. That's Russell Vought, who they call the quarterback of Project 2025, the one who is at the Office of Management and Budget, who is absolutely using financial sticks as a cudgel, using money as a cudgel. And you see that in everything that we have seen this past week, everything we've seen these past 3 months, everything from the threat at Harvard to say you can't allow international students to come here, and what you see from the pen of Pam Blondie, you see her saying that we know that you all rely on the tuition paid by Pam Bondi. I know it's Bondi, but I think I like the L because they all look like they came out of central casting from the 1980s and 90s, and they've aged horribly. And just back away from the plastic surgery. All right, take doggone Christy Nunn with you, because y'all should really stay off from the knife. But anyway, the point is this: what the Attorney General Pam Bondi says to Harvard this week is that, we're going to take away your ability to enroll students, and then international students, and then they're going to try to attach it to the money Harvard gets. Harvard, the richest university in the country. Anybody makes $200,000 or less, if their family makes $200,000 or less, Harvard puts together a package to meet that student's financial needs. They even throw in coats for students who come from cold countries. So that means that if your family came from another country, and if you came from another country and your family makes less than $200,000 a year in US dollars, then you don't pay to go to Harvard. So they're not collecting tuition from them, Pam Bondi. Now, if you got more money than God and you come in, then yeah, you're writing the check. You're paying full freight. But Howard, I wish Harvard has the financial wherewithal to take a couple of cudgels, to take a couple of sticks. And then they're going to threaten them and take $2.2 billion from them in federal grants. That will be our tax money, by the way. A $160 million contract they have. They want to take that multi-year contract. That's our tax money. But Russell Vought understands, while his friend Kevin Phillips is fighting an intellectual war, a cultural war, and if you read his dissertation, as we've talked about many times, you'll understand at the heart of Kevin Roberts' concept is assimilation. Come into this imaginary white ass culture that we're saying is American culture, when in fact it has never been American culture. And on the other side, Russell Vought said, I got you. I got the stick. I got the subjection. I got the subordination. I'm going to use the Office of Management and Budget, typically not a vestigial part of the executive branch, but a smaller part, and I'm going to draw all men unto me, to use another old gospel song. If I be lifted up from the election, I'll draw all lackeys unto me. So now all the other places, education, all the other places, Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burnham, all the other units, OMB is the one quarterbacking this whole thing, because the guy running OMB was the quarterback of this project. And chapter and verse, I did not know until Wednesday night, my next to last class over at the Howard University School of Law for the semester, one of my students showed me the Project 2025 tracker. And I had a tracker, or I got a tracker. And then you can click on it and you see every element of Project 2025 with what percentage they've already done, what percentage remains to be done, and how they're doing it. It's all out in the open. It's like, wow, okay. So in that process, then, what do you attack if you're trying to, in this metaphor that Harrar is using, this mosaic of fortresses? You're trying to shore up your fortress with the idea that every other human in the world lives in a country that should be shoring up its fortress. And then you're going to, from your fortress, if you got enough power, take other fortresses, take the Fortress of Greenland, take the Panama Canal, take Canada or whatever, which you see, he ain't been talking like that much. Not why much lately. Why? Because the clown is not well. And the clown actually believed the United States has that kind of muscle. But the clown doesn't realize the United States doesn't have that kind of muscle anymore. Not unless they go into the nuclear weapons, which is why it is a difficult time to be alive if you believe that death is the end, that death finds you thinking that you die. Because we could be on the verge of death as a species. That will happen eventually, but it could happen quickly now, because once your delusion becomes so real to you that you think somehow you could win by losing, you'll do anything. This is the thing we should be terrified of with the clown and his Christian soldier, who is not a Christian at all, Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon. But at any rate, back out of the footnote into the general conversation we're having. If you're shoring up your fortress and you think you can think, oh, thank you, Prof. 2012 is the movie. Thank you. Yes. Chiwetel Ejiofor. Yes. The prophecy, as they said, it was in it. Yes. So the whole idea of taking other countries, invading other fortresses and taking other fortresses, because you are so strong that you can do it. And in a mosaic of fortresses metaphor, rather than a liberal world order metaphor, you think that that's how you protect yourself, then you got to make sure everything in your fortress is down with you. So what do? You try to stamp out anybody who is thinking, anybody who has generosity, anybody who is thinking as a, let's use the same word differently in the mouths of people who can't spell it, but who have been trained by their fear to think that somehow they are saying that this is a bad thing. You think somehow anybody who is thinking with the liberal world order, which means live and let live, at least manage it, at least metaphorically. We know there are problems with that, but still. You think they're an enemy of your country. You're a liberal. You're not an American. I would damn near go down the road with them hillbillies on that. Because American in their mind means white nationalist fortress, means white national fortress in a globe full of fortresses. And they got the best fortress. And yet, even as their children's favorite singer is Beyonce and favorite basketball players, LeBron James or Asia Wilson, they don't, that's okay because those people have been subjugated. They're singers and dancers. They're ball players. They're rappers. So they're not power wielders. You understand? So they're really no threat. And the people who have some control over the apparatus, whether it be financial control, that's the billionaires who can really get this tax cut without y'all tax money. Whether it's the politicians who can figure out a way to get an election close enough to tip it over, steal it, really. If you listen to Greg Palast, then we should. They said, well, if we get control of this apparatus, which is why they wrote that whole ass book, we're going to run a Boston. This is our last chance because there are not enough of us who think this way. Even among the group that has been labeled white, as James Baldwin would say, the people who think they are white, there are not enough of us in this way to win everybody else, which is the majority, over to the way we see things. So we got to be as shrewd as we can, and we may get one more shot at creating this dominance to create inside the walls of our fortress the kind of mentality that would allow us to go on a little further. That's Steve Bannon. And so what do? You attack the people who would have a conversation and maybe think differently. That's going to be the universities. You use the cudgel. Russell Vaught and them have shown them. You use the money. We got in charge of the federal budget. What about the law? Damn the law. We're just going to run roughshod over it. There are three institutions that began to look at that must be attacked. You attack the education, the universities. And if you saw in today's paper, I want to say it was today's New York Times, front page of the New York Times, Trump turns up pressure, but educators fight back. That's on the front page of the Times here. Over here, you see this. Two articles written together. One, warning to Harvard, give data or lose foreign students. That's what they're saying. We're going to get rid of all your foreign students. And of course, doggone Christy Nome says that they're doing it because that the university, Harvard, has created a hostile learning environment for Jewish students because of its failure to condemn anti-Semitism. Some of the biggest anti-Semites in the world live in the United States of America, fundamentalist Christians, as they call themselves, not Christians at all. But in that process, you're going to call Harvard anti-Semitic? The government you're propping up, an absolute member of that mosaical fortress in the so-called Middle East, Bibi Netanyahu, Arabic and Hebrew are both branches of Semitic languages. So there's an argument to be made that the biggest anti-Semite in the world in terms of taking lives is Bibi Netanyahu. You're killing hundreds of thousands of human beings. If you trace the language they speak and the language you speak, and a lot of them speak your language, you don't speak theirs. But the common root of it will take you back to the fact that, this is the whole Ishmael, Isaac and Ishmael metaphor in the Bible. Isn't it? All the folks in here who do the Christian way of knowing, particularly Old Testament, particularly the Abrahamic faith traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they're all related. But anyway, I'm saying all that to say that Nome and them want to take this money from Harvard. They're using the excuse of anti-Semitism, but that is not the point at all. What they're looking for is domination. They want to destroy the universities, because those are places where people might actually be thinking about stuff and talking about stuff. And now you got a problem. And then they want to spend it. This is the second article on the front page. States resist threats to cut funding over DEI. The Trump administration is facing lawsuits and growing pushback over the demand that all 50 states end the use of what it says are illegal diversity programs in public schools or risk losing federal funding for low-income students. About a dozen, mostly Democratic leading states, including California, New York, and Michigan, have refused to sign on to the administration's directive. The nation's two largest teachers' unions, along with the NAACP, are challenging the demand in federal court. Now, a couple of things about this, and we continue to put this in context. Remember, the theme we're looking at is the distinction between a liberal world order of cooperation, at least theoretically, and the mosaic of fortresses, the Trumpian worldview, and he's just the latest brand for this thing that's been going on since settler colonialism started. And within that fortress called United States of America, there's a desire for assimilation. So when we start talking about fighting black, One of the things we have to disabuse ourselves of is there's something special about the way Americans, whatever that means, think, the framework Americans have, that will somehow create a framework for us to do what is most natural to African people, and I would argue most people in the world, which is cooperate rather than fight. Our cooperation here in the United States of America as African people has always overflowed the state boundaries. Attempts to narrate us differently notwithstanding. I don't care how many people try to shoehorn African people into this narrative of U.S. patriotism being at the anchor of our lives. Quite frankly, when you say that you are your ancestors' wildest dream, did you ask your ancestors who their ancestors were? Nobody had a dream of being an American, and they didn't have a dream of being an American. They had first dream was to return home. Failing that, their next dream was to be left alone and survive so they could build for themselves. Somehow, the narrative is something. They was waving red, white, and blue rags and running up behind George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and weeping a tear when the Constitution was read for the first time at the Pennsylvania State House. You know, lost your damn mind. These are people who are not reading, not studying, clearly not in conversation. University might fix that. K-12 might fix that as well. Except these people understand, the Kelvin Phillipses of the world, that you got to get in there and root out this idea, any other idea other than this patriotism idea, and they'll let you stay as long as you know, ball player, two Negroes maybe at the Pentagon who have shown some fealty, maybe a consensual manservant, to use Lord Victoria Burke's term, like Byron Donalds. I mean, you know, Clarence Thomas. They'll let a couple of you stay, but the rest of y'all be ball players and singers, and you know, my kid can love you, but you just don't interfere with what we're doing. Why? Because we're getting ready to go take these other countries. You understand? And so what I'm getting to is that you attack the universities and you attack K-12, you attack education. And the second article I just read from, you know, these states are fighting back. Well, I'm gonna come to the third of the three categories that you got to fight in terms of this idea of subjugation. So people will assimilate. Education is the second of the three. The first, as I said, well, no, it's the first of the three, is universities, is K-12, is education. And in this case, we talked, Lamont and I, and we'll air it next week, to the good brother Derek Johnson, the president of the NCP. And, you know, I was walking through with him the complaint that the NAACP Legal Defense Fund filed. And Janae Nelson wrote something in The Nation magazine a couple of days ago. I think there's salient to this, and I'll mention that in a moment. But the idea is the NAACP filed a lawsuit as well, because they said what that dear colleague, I mean, we talked about that dear colleague letter of Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2025, that came from the Department of Education led by the Secretary of Wrestling and her Chief of Civil Rights Division, Craig Gaynor, that says that we read the SFFA case, the Students for Fair Admission case, the Harvard and North Carolina cases that ended affirmative action in higher education. We read that as applying to K-12 as well. It is an absurd theory. You get laughed out of any first year law school constitutional law class in the country. And yet it will depend on who the judge is, because on May 15th, they're going to argue Trump's executive order trying to get rid of birthright citizenship. They're literally going to hear that case about a month from now. So never say never. And I'll get to this point in a minute, because assimilation requires some sense of consistency in the law, even if it's a precedent. And what's being revealed is there's no consistency, because the only thing that matters is power. And now that they are in power, they would keep bringing these same cases that should be settled law. Stare decisis is what they would call it in legal terms. This is not just precedent. This has been decided, except it ain't been decided. Meaning what? If we get the power, we'll overturn everything. Or better yet, we'll just do what we want and make up a law later. But my point is this. By attacking education, whether it be the universities, and Harvard is fighting back now, which may embolden everybody else to fight back, at least 3 schools in the Big Ten, Rutgers, Faculty Senate, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, Faculty Senate, Indiana, Bloomington, Faculty Senate. There are 18 schools in the Big Ten. They play football and basketball. It's about all that most people know about it. Now, Ohio State Faculty Senate saying they're going to pass a resolution. Michigan State and Lansing, they say they're going to pass a resolution. What the resolutions being passed in the Big Ten, 3 so far, and others lining up to be passed. Now, particularly that Harvard has jumped out there and said, we're not doing none of this. You want us to give you the names of our foreign students? You want us to give you their grades and give you the classes that they are in to make you can check the credit? You want us to do a litmus test on the ideological positions of our faculty and students? You can go to hell. If we do that, there's no such thing as the university. If we do that, there's no such thing as the rule of law. Well, guess what? There's no such thing as the rule of law. And that is what this kind of thing will reveal. And then people have a choice to make. If you want a rule of law, you can't go along with these mosaic of fortress people. But if you don't mind not having a rule of law, then you can let them do what you want until enough people decide they're going to take it the other way, because there are other laws that could be involved. And one of them is we just be out in the streets fighting. This is why you try to manage these things with the least possibility of violence. This is Martin Luther King, classic Martin Luther King, although he believed it as a way of life. Many people in the SNCC and others believed it as a tactic. But either way, it is an honorable and useful approach. I don't want to kill you, so let's talk it out. But if we don't talk it out, it's going to be another form of conflict. Anyway, continuing. So the attack then on education in this attempt to subjugate, to subordinate, in order to create an assimilated fortress that you will then send out into battle against other forces and try to take those forces by power, financial, cultural, military, physical power. This battle, you got to weaken the people who are just going to be thinking for themselves, which is why the Harvard lawsuit and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund lawsuit I was reading through and we were discussing with Derek Johnson are keying on the First Amendment, freedom of association, freedom of speech, keying in the NAACP Legal Defense motion, which was filed here in the United States, in the District of Columbia. It's keying on the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. The U.S. Constitution has a Fifth Amendment, which carries the guarantees, due process, equal protection that are extended to the states after the Civil War by the 14th Amendment, which is why the Harvard case is anchored in the 14th Amendment, but the same basic principle. You are not providing equal protection under the law. You lied and said it was about a subset of students, but we're about all students, all faculty, all people, and that includes the people who, when you read the NAACP brief, the Legal Defense Fund brief, they're doing things like telling these students in Ohio that y'all can't have y'all kente ceremony for graduation. You got to change the name and basically just stop it. At Rowan University, they gonna suck up all the programs. So forget Black History Month. You want to do that kind of thing. In Iowa, they're telling the young people that they can't have this convening that names the word Black. In other words, they're attacking everything. Why? They want you to assimilate. And if they can get you to assimilate, then they're gonna send your army out to march on everybody else in the country and in the world, in the world. Because you're coming out of your fortress with an assimilated mind. It's never going to work. Russell Vault, Dr. Kevin Phillips, y'all in a fantasy world. It was never a country. To quote Langston Hughes, America never was America to me. Hughes goes on to say, but this I vow, America will be. Brother, I share your aspiration. But as W.E.B. Du Bois said in 1960, and Whither, Now, and Why, if we're going to be part of this project, we coming in as our full selves, and I ain't changing nothing that don't make sense to me. I'm not assimilating, in other words. So your white doll that you got some children to pick because they're children and looking at you as an adult, you can take all that. And you can take that lie that we was all weeping a tear at Fort McHenry. We weren't there. So the whole idea then of attacking universities is to stop the kind of thing we do week after week. We've jailbroken the university, black, white, or otherwise. We're here together thinking. On Monday nights, we hash it out and the conversations get deeper and deeper and richer, and we come away revitalized and thinking about this. The second of the three institutions that have to be attacked are the states. This is why the states are suing. That's why they're after Tish James. That's why they put that terrible lawyer that lost in court for Trump in New York as the attorney general in New Jersey. They are trying to attack from inside the states. The states in a fortress. Think about the states, think about the governors, think about the attorneys general as vassals. That's what the Republican ones are. That's what Brian Kemp in Georgia is. That's what Maymall is in Alabama. That's what the governor of Mississippi, that bad toupee wearing Tate Reeves, or the shovel mouth bastard governor of Texas who wants to take $1 billion of your tax money and give it to private schools, Greg Abbott. That's who he is. That's why McMaster is in South Carolina trying to destroy Planned Parenthood, claiming it's about abortion when maybe 5% of the services Planned Parenthood offers are abortion. People going there for their health care. That's certainly who the pufferfish governor of Florida is, Ron DeSantis. That's who they are. Even in a state like Virginia, when you see that clown that is the governor of Virginia, and it don't have to be black, because if this black woman who is right there with him, the lieutenant governor, wins the election in Virginia, you get it to continue. So the whole point is that this attack on the states, you're either going to be for them or against them. If you are against them, these states are going to the court, which is the third of the three. One is education, second is the states, third is the courts. The states, they're going to try to get them to get down and lay down. The ones they got on board with them who won't expand Medicare, who won't expand the programs, the social service programs, who are trying to put a work requirement on some of this other stuff, those people, they've got. Those are the vassals to the king, vassals to the rulers. But then these same people want to turn around and be subsidized by the tax money that comes from the federal government. So the contradictions are there, but this is about raw and naked power. The third of the three, of course, is the law, is the legal frameworks, is the legal frameworks. It's very important. So at this stage, what they are doing, trying to get people to assimilate, is just, let's ignore the law. I mean, you snatched that guy and took him and threw him in El Salvador. Yeah, don't care. Stop us. You ain't got no police force. We got the federal marshals. Yeah, but the federal marshals report to the attorney general, and the attorney general ain't never going to charge. Okay, so now the judge has told these clowns, told them yesterday, I am considering opening up an investigation as to whether you're in contempt of court, and we all know that you are. And if you don't charge, then I am empowered to, by the law, and I will consider appointing a private prosecutor. Oh my God. Now, every one of them big law firms to the tune of over $1 billion at this point that has gotten down for Donald Trump. And now, as it was reported in the papers this week, Trump is coming back saying, yeah, I know y'all said y'all do 50 million for me, or you'll do 100 million for me, but I got some other things I want you to do. What might some of those other things be? Look, I had a trash lawyer in New York, so I'm gonna need some of y'all to be my lawyer, my personal lawyer. I'm gonna need some, what? Yeah. So you already got down. I'm telling you, this Harvard case might embolden some of those people, because everybody in those firms didn't agree. But once Harvard stood up in that social structure, that's going to embolden other places. Like I said, Yale's faculty senate saying they're going to tell the Yale administration to do the same thing. I am thoroughly convinced, having been an academic for most of my adult life, all of it if you include being a student, and having taught at universities most of that adult life, and knowing how faculties operate in white and black spaces, I am thoroughly convinced it was the faculty at Harvard that was like, man, y'all got to mess our reputation up. We can't do that. You got to do something. And this step may embolden. We're getting down to the resolution now. So anyway, so attack the universities and K-12 in the United States. Attack the states if they're not getting down with you, because at the state level, we saw what happened in South Carolina with them taking the same anti-DEI language was in the presidential executive order and applying it to the state. The ones that they have control of, they're going to be mini versions of what's happening in the federal level. The ones that they don't, they're going to be in court fighting, and they're going to count in the third category to overturn the legal framework by saying this is what the law says when it works for them, and when it doesn't work for them, ignoring it and saying they're doing be legal anyway, that they're doing it according to the law anyway, which is absurd. So the bailiwick, though, the central thing binding together this fortress logic, I think that Harald is writing about, the central thing binding it is nationalism and nativism, the idea of the nation, the imaginary bond that brings us all together, and alliances within that bond and without that bond. So very quickly, the United States says we are the United States of America. We have a national concept. Okay. As long as you ain't harming nobody, no problem. You wave your flags. I'll eat some popcorn with you, see some fireworks. But the minute you exceed those rituals and try to stamp me into being you see the rebellion. Particularly when I ain't got no money and I have no good job. I can't get the education I want, and you out here killing us in the streets. At that point, as we saw in the summer of 2020, we rebel. But it's always been a fragile concept, the nation. But then overthinking, it seems to me, in terms of these Project 2025 people and the clown, over relying on the strength of that concept. It's a very fragile concept that they think somehow is very strong. So when they say the American people don't want this, we don't care what you say. There is no American people. We're doing this because the American people gave us a mandate. Are we in the American people? Yeah, if you're playing basketball or singing, but if you're not, and you don't get to vote anyway, okay, so there ain't no American people. My point is this: They're overplaying their hand because within the fortress, they think they can get everybody to assimilate. That has never been the case and will never be the case. Outside of the fortress, in this metaphor of a mosaic of fortresses, they're looking to either dominate everybody else or build alliances with a few other fortresses until they can dominate them. We saw the prime minister, for example, of Italy here in the United States this week, Meloni. Meloni said she's sitting there with Donald Trump face to face, orange to apricot or whatever her face is. And she says, we can bring the West, we can make the West great again. Huh? We make it the West great again. We make it the West great again. You're Italian. Your whiteness has always been up for suspicion. 100 years ago, if you had come in the White House and said that, they'd have put your ass in jail. You weren't white. You were barely white, I guess, in the 1920s. No, you weren't. 1925? Nah, you still trapped on Ellis Island. If you don't read the history books, if you don't want to study, you can go watch The Godfather Part 2 when little Vito Corleone, Vito Andolini actually, but the guy misreads the tag and he's from Corleone, which means that's your name now. Get down or lay down. The point is that 100 years ago, Meloni couldn't have come into the United States and said, we're going to make the West great again. In fact, I shouldn't even say that about Vito Corleone, because Corleone is in Sicilia. It's in Sicily. The Sicilians, the Italians looked at the Sicilians, the Neapolitans, you looking at the Sicilians like you ain't us. You know when all y'all became white? When you crossed the Atlantic and anglicized your name, or kept your name, but anglicized your values, or mixed your values with other people's values. And then the whiteness, it began to come little by little. And it was sealed by the idea that you were not black. So when the mob meets in The Godfather Part 2 and the man says, no, Godfather Part 1, the man says, we would keep the trafficking heroin among the colored people in my city. They're animals anyway, so let them lose their souls. That's a metaphor for the niggas. I have been here long enough to understand that one of the ways you get the whiteness with rocket fuel boost is to yell N-word the loudest. So now I don't have to be black. As Gil Scott Heron said in his poem song, his comrade Jose Torres is dead. He says, here, they didn't need no new niggas. Here, they didn't need no niggas. Maybe the Italians and the Irish will be the new niggas. But at some point, as long as you have black people, you ain't got to be black. You can begin to make your way toward an imaginary whiteness that will absolutely fragment once nobody else is around. But Meloni got on a plane, got off a plane, came here this week to the United States of America, sat next to a man in the White House and said, we're going to make the West great again. This fortress and her fortress looking for allies. And I'm just hearing wafts of Mussolini, except Trump is no Hitler. He like Fredo, as we talked about this week on Sirius XM. He don't know enough. He's dumb. Of course, he doesn't think he's dumb. He thinks he's smart, not like everybody says. But anyway, the point is this. Then you got other people who are clearly not white, but who are clearly part of the vassal states internationally, like Nayib Bukele. Bukele is the head of El Salvador. So Bukele said, yeah, we got this man over here. We got this man down here. We got Abrego Garcia here. And we ain't sending him back. Except what you see is a little bit of thing cracking now. Steve Bannon was like, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. The president can do whatever the hell he wants. Yeah, Chris Van Hollen, senator from Maryland, said that guy's my constituent. He ain't do nothing wrong. So he goes down there he goes down to El Salvador. They say, you can't see him. He said, I'll stay an extra day. They said, nah, you can't see him. Then finally, they dress him up, give him a fresh shirt and a baseball cap, and you see the senator from Maryland, one of the senators from Maryland, the other senator, of course, is Angela Also Brooks, the sister, who I expect probably will go down there soon. You see him having coffee with this man who you got trapped. Where's doggone Kristi Noem? Where are the white nasties from the Congress who keep going in there and taking pictures in front of these people who are 5'9", 100 pounds sitting behind bars, or at least it looks that way. Maybe that's a green screen, maybe not. We don't know. Cosplaying in military fatigues with guns like doggone Kristi Noem. Now the other side is going down there because you can't stop them, and maybe there's some life in the legislative branch as well. Lamont and I talked on Friday with Congressman Glenn Ivey. Congressman Ivey, I asked him, hey, man, what's going on? He said, yeah, I'm thinking about going down there. He said, Cory Booker may be going down there. Booker, of course, is from Jersey, not Maryland, but that's beside the point. If people start going down there, maybe you begin to build some type of resistance that will overwhelm these fake assimilationists, because they're not trying to assimilate you. They're trying to get you to get down or lay down within their fortress so they can go out and build alliances with other fortresses so they can maintain their continuing rule. Well, patriotism is the gloss that too many of us swallow in the name of going along to get along. I was looking, there is apparently a configuration of 130 plus college presidents, various ideological and intellectual postures. And they're talking about how universities should, among other things, how universities should respond in this moment. There were some comments made by the president of Benedict College. And I was just at Benedict the other day, about a month and a half ago. Dr. Reba Kelsey spoke down there, the Listerville Middleton lecturer, of course, at the behest of the Catalyst in Bongi in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, the good brother, Dr. Bernie Gallman, and all of the folks there. And the president of Benedict University said, our students have to assimilate. And I'm listening to what she said, this Black woman, president of Benedict College, considered a success story. I think about the former president of Howard University, Wayne Frederick. They both love Black people. And that mentality is not a dislike of Black people, not an idea of not loving Black people, but it is an assimilationist philosophy that is not going to allow you to even access the thing that you like to stand on, which is the tradition of the people who came before you, because the tradition of African people in the United States of America has been to see liberation beyond the nation state, to fight Black. And of these very HBCU campuses, which pride themselves on having a tradition of liberation struggle and liberation work, the thing that is valued after it has occurred is the thing that when it was occurring, they try to suppress. At best, they try to shield it from these external assimilationist impulses, like Mordecai Johnson, who shielded people on his faculty who were considered communists, including Dr. Wilkerson, who was a communist, open communist, or Council Trenum at Alabama State University, when Joanne Robinson and them was organizing the Montgomery bus boycott, and he had to play dumb to the governor of Alabama, all these politicians, even as his own wife was involved in the Montgomery Women's Political Council. So there is a way to do it. But on the other end of the spectrum, you got cats like Felton at Southern University, who in the whole ass police campaign killed students in 1968. Or for that matter, dancing on the razor's edge, the president of South Carolina State University during the Orangeburg massacre in 1968. Jackson State College, where they came on the campus, shooting up the campus, these damn National Guard and federalized law enforcement. The whole idea that we've walked that razor's edge before, but don't sit here in 2025 and tell children they have to assimilate in a very state where the student nonviolent coordinator could be went toe to toe. Student as in students from HBCUs, which is what overwhelmingly SNCC students were. Whether it be Marion Barry out of Lemoyne Owen, and then Fisk, whether it be Charlie Cobb out of Howard University with Stokely Carmichael, and whether it be Joyce and Dory Ladner at Tougaloo after they put them out of Jackson State College. These are HBCU students. And to say in 2025 our students have to assimilate, I know what you mean. I know what I think you mean. Because again, the attack on these college campuses on free thought isn't just Trump and the Department of Wrestling and Education from outside. It's the assimilationist impulses on the inside that would say they don't need the humanities. They don't need to talk about all this history and all this literature and music stuff. Give them a little bit of an elective so we can say we did something, but they really need to focus on STEM and AI. And I will submit to you that nobody know a damn thing about artificial intelligence. They just talking. In fact, I don't know that I have. Yeah, I do. This is the brand new New Yorker. In fact, it comes out and it's dated the week before. It's the week after. It's the April 21st. Issue. This just came. I just read this article in wee hours this morning. It's called Luddite Lessons. Department of Labor. This is the category, the session in the New Yorker. Luddite Lessons. The weavers lost the fight to save their livelihoods. As AI looms, can we do better? What John Cassidy is arguing in this week's New Yorker that's the cover if you want to go to the magazine stand if you don't subscribe to it. What he's arguing is the technology fight. The Luddites were the ones who were trying to gum up the factories as these factories came online and put them out of work, put their craft, made it irrelevant, or made it obsolete, rather, not irrelevant, obsolete. I guess there is a form of irrelevance, certainly a form of redundancy. But the point that he's making is this is never about technology, it's about labor and wealth as proxies. And he said what AI And he's talking to all these AI experts. We said what they're doing is not like previous iterations of technological advances, which enhanced human capability and quote unquote productivity. A cotton gin that makes Africans in the South have to work twice as hard because now there's more cotton to be ginned and picked and processed and shipped. No, what AI will do, instead of enhancing, it's going to replace. Now you got as much as 3/4 of the human race who will not have jobs because there's nothing for them to do. Now, what do you do with that? Maybe, as Charlton Heston said 50 years ago, you make them into food and eat them. Maybe, as the Matrix trilogy says, you stick them in pods and use them as energy sources. But what you're not going to do is have their labor enhanced. This ain't about technology, it's about labor. So then when it gets to the solution phase in the article, well, what does that mean? That means we got to retemper AI to make it enhance human capability rather than replace human capability. And at that point, my friends, we're talking about a pipe dream. But on a campus, in a classroom, in a jailbroken space like this, what we can and must do is continue to develop our capacity to think and to be in community. Let the social structures label it liberal politics. I'm not interested in those labels. What I am interested in is our common humanity. And as our common humanity is tapped into, then we are always going to be able to somehow resolve the questions of being in the world, because we are in the world together. We can say I'm French, I'm English, I'm whatever, but we all breathe in the same air. Or as Julius Scott wrote in his book about resistance in the Caribbean, we all share the common wind. And he, of course, was quoting the revolutionaries of the 19th century in the Caribbean, the Haitian Revolution, the revolutions in Jamaica, all of those. Suriname, and we can start talking about them, but we won't at this point. But the point is the bailiwick of a mosaic of fortresses is nativism and alliances. Within the fortress of the United States, they want you to assimilate so they can build this nativist thing. So we got to be patriotic. So when President Artist says we got to assimilate, what I hear her saying in part is we got to acquire the skills to make us competitive in the United States. Well, we don't live only in the United States. We live in the world. And as Fatima Jackson, Professor Jackson, always used to tell our freshmen when we ran the freshman seminar, she would come give a lecture and say there are more honor students in India, more honor students in China than there are students in the United States of America. You can pretend to be in your fortress, but you live, if you take that metaphor, you live in a mosaic of fortresses. And guess what? The Chinese gun is bigger than yours. The Chinese economic gun, the Chinese cultural gun, the Chinese physical gun. This could be ugly. So let me continue this and kind of wind this up to a close. What you see pushing back in these educational spaces, as you think, is the generosity of cooperation on a college campus. Some students at Howard University, in the late hours of Wednesday evening, I was in class, and I found out the next morning, Thursday morning, my 8 a.m. class, the student asked me, Dr. Carr, did you hear about the People's University? I said, no, what's that? He said, last night we set up some tents on campus in front of Frederick Douglass Hall. And we began to talk about the issues, world issues, and we started talking about conditions, not only here at Howard, but in the United States, but in the world. And they said within an hour or two, some university officials showed up, and then the Metro Police and the Howard Police showed up. So for what? They said, well, it's getting to a certain hour and y'all can't be out here. I'm thinking, as many times as I walk the campus at Howard University or any other school, at midnight, 9 p.m., 2 o'clock in the morning, coming back when we take students to the African Burial Ground on a Saturday night, and we get back from New York and it's 2 a.m., we let them off in front of their dorms, and then we pull the last buses up, 5 buses sitting in front of the student center, and I get out of the last bus after making sure everybody's stuff is not there, and if he left something, I got it all in bags, and I'm taking it to my car, and I see students walking around. They don't see no police chasing them off. It wasn't the fact that you were there. It was the fact that you were there in a way that might maybe signal that there's free thought going on in this campus. And they got doggone Christy Nome telling a campus with this got dozens of billions of dollars in their endowment that they out there sniffing around for ideologically correct students and faculty. I understand the impulse that would lead the university on the very day the kids told me about what happened to set out an email saying that they believe in freedom of speech. Howard University stands for freedom of speech, stands for what all universities stand for, stands for what Harvard said in the lawsuit that they filed against the Department of Education, saying you can't deprive us of our First Amendment rights. And at the same time, it said we stand against anti-Semitism. I do too. I stand against anti-Semitism 10 toes down, whether the people are speaking the Semitic language of Hebrew or the Semitic language of Arabic. I am an absolute supporter of Semites and every other human being, and I'm against anti-Semitism. So this shouldn't be an issue. But I understand the razor's edge administrators on. This is the history of universities. This is the history of HBCUs. And Howard and Benedict and Fisk and Morehouse and Spelman and Stillman and Grambling State University and Payne College and Augusta, Georgia, ain't got the endowment of Howard, but we have something in abundance that is even more than what those schools have. It's not financial, it's cultural. And if you're going to quote the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee or the first SNCC, which met in the 40s on the campus of Benedict College, where W.E.B. Du Bois gave the famous speech, "Behold the Land," where he said the future of the Negro races in the South, even as Esther Cooper Jackson, who helped arrange his travel to Benedict College. And I stood in front of that chapel when I was down there a couple of months ago, thinking about the fact that that's where Du Bois spoke. Yes. And that was not the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee of the 1960s. It was the Southern Negro Youth Congress, the first SNCC of the 1940s. But if you talk about these things, you have to understand that you can never allow that spirit to die. You can never allow that standard to die. And so then this bailiwick of the mosaic of fortresses, this metaphor that he is using to describe the world we are living in and the nativist concept they're trying to make us assimilate, you can never let that die. And so you've got to support everyone, students, faculty, alumni, community, first of all, because all these universities, all these K-12 institutions should be on the periphery of the education that we're talking about now. And I'm going to begin to bring this to a close. We're in Emancipation Day season here in the District of Columbia. Emancipation Day in the District of Columbia is the 16th of April every year. And we talked about it a little bit last week. We talked about it on air this week on Sirius. We had the good brother, Dr. Frank Smith, another HBCU graduate and founder of SNCC. He came out of Morehouse College. I saw Cornel West is going to be the commencement speaker at Morehouse this season. I'm wondering if that's a hint as to who the next president of Morehouse is going to be. I guess we all going to find out. But Frank is the founding director of the African American Civil War Museum here in the District of Columbia. And on Wednesday, after we got off the air, I went over to the National Afro-American Civil War Monument that has the name of every man who fought in the U.S. uniform in the Civil War. Not every person, because Harriet Tubman name out up there. Even though she was not allowed to be formally in the Army, we know that she fought in her way. They call her a spy. She was much more than that. Etta Field's Black book, Combi, we talked about that. But I went down to help Frank and help the people who were there read all of the 3,100 names of the Africans who were freed in the District of Columbia on the 16th of April, 1862. Because in reading those names, Frank also had us read the amount that was given to the captors, to those slaves, so-called slave masters, to those criminals that had us captive, that had us hostage. And when you see the names, you read somebody's name and then you see the amount. You read somebody's name, you see the amount. And then you read somebody's name and it says zero. A human being with no money value attached to their name. It's very emotional. Because why wouldn't you have a value attached to your name? Either you're too young or you're too old. To my babies and old folks. And you know the irony of that? That's a social structure valuation. You put $1 on somebody's name. But in an Africana framework, ways of knowing, in an Africana framework, cultural meaning making, but particularly ways of knowing among the Kikongo people, for example, when you come back from the other side, when you come back from the spiritual realm into the physical realm as a baby, you just came back, which means your clarity, your spiritual clarity is fresh because you just came back. And when you are an elder, the oldest among us who will soon cross that Kalunga line back into the ancestral realm, your experience and your awareness being able to listen put you close, which is why you put old folks and babies together. How ironic that in an Africana framework, the children, the babies and the elders are the most valuable, depending on how you describe value. In a governance formation, in a ways of knowing foundation, in a formation, in Africana studies formation, the babies and the old folks the most valuable. And in a social structure valuation, they are the least valuable. Zeros by the names. It was a metaphor. I was just struck listening to these names and reading some of these names over and over and over again, thinking about what is one's value in existence. Kilmar, Armando Abrego Garcia. When Propaganda Barbie, the White House press secretary, gets up and says, this man will never be our father. He will never be a Maryland father again. This Maryland farmer, the White House press secretary, gets up this week. This man will never be a Maryland father again. He will never come to the United States again. You can't value him, Propaganda Barbie. Because guess what? We're going to roll over you like the sea. Because there are more of us than there are you. And you can't assimilate us out of our humanity. Even as you stand there with your shrunken worldview with a crucifix around your neck. As if you are a Christian. Saying that this man has no value. Because you equate his humanity with citizenship. And this man committed no crime, was in this country legally, but y'all going to attack birthright citizenship, aren't you? Propaganda Barbie, aren't you clown? Aren't you doggone Christy Known? Aren't you playing blondie? Aren't y'all? Of course you are, because in your shrunken souls, your fear animates your actions. Because that's what we are talking about at base is fear. It ain't hatred. Hatred is stoked in fear. What you scared of? So when we think about that in the season of Emancipation Day, and by the way, if you all want to know more about Emancipation Day in the District of Columbia, you can look at sessions in class, sessions 73, 74, 121, particularly 121, which was titled On White Juneteenth and SCOTUS Decisions. That was 121. That was when the legislation was signed making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Can't get rid of that with executive orders, clown, but watch him sign something on the 19th. Oh, watch these states, these hillbilly states try to do something to provoke everybody, but y'all just go right on by it. Because on the 4th of July or White Juneteenth, that's what we were talking about in session 121. And we talked about Emancipation Day, DC Emancipation Day. But if you want to look at one that ties DC Emancipation Day to every other Emancipation Day in the seminar, then the recommendation is to go to session 171. That's a year later. It's the second year of the federal holiday of Juneteenth. In class, we discussed under the title, What is Juneteenth to the Negro? That's what we discuss emancipation rituals in the hemisphere. Again, the compendium, more and more valuable. Everything we add to it, we're just adding to it. So, thinking about this is very important. We just passed Jackie Robinson Day this past week. Every baseball player in Major League Baseball in the United States wore the number 42. And last Saturday night at Sankofa, Jordan Strudwick, the good brother Jordan Strudwick of WPFW, part of Sankofa staff, Haile Garima and myself talked about Paul Robeson, which sent me back into my archive. I kept all the Robeson stuff out of storage and the Jack Robinson stuff. So talk about how they tried to turn Jackie Robinson against Paul Robeson. And we talked about that last week. So I only mention one other thing. This is the House Un-American Activities Committee. And before he died, Jack Robinson, in his memoir, I Never Had It Made, as I've talked about many times, if y'all want to see that. This memoir, I went through the compendium and looked. It's amazing what y'all did to build that bibliography, that compendium. This book I have mentioned and or read from or discussed in sessions 30, 34, 46, 58, 59, 173, 110, which I did 6 times, which is the one you want to start with. You want to talk about Robinson in that context, and 206. That's the number of times. Understand? It's very interesting because there's a whole thing to be done just surveying how many times certain things were mentioned to get a sense even of a broad spectrum, zoom out and see the echoes and rhythms of Africana. This work is so important for us to do. And then when you combine that with Monday and office hours, where we're all in that conversation, and you combine that then to the Mbangi that is typed in the so-called chat or the Mbangi in office hours and the one that is typed here in Knarrative and in YouTube, and you put all that together, that's not artificial intelligence. That's the only AI I recognize. That's African intelligence. Oh my God, it's incredible. But the point is this. Robinson, we talked about that Saturday night, and Robinson basically says, I was wrong. If I had to do it all over again, I would not let them use me against Jack Roosevelt. I would not let them use me against Paul Bustle Robeson. I would not let them use me, the House Un-American Activities Committee. And of course, as we said Saturday night at Sankofa, the counsel to McCarthy, the red baiter, the red hunter at that House Un-American Activities Committee was Roy Cohn, the nasty piece of work who was the mentor. And I'm saying mentor instead of Jegna. He ain't nowhere near a Jegna. The mentor to Donald John Trump was sitting there persecuting Jack Robinson, persecuting Paul Robeson, trying to twist Langston Hughes into narking on people. Do you know, or have you ever known a member of the Communist Party? All that BS, the blacklist, the thing that Gerald is writing about, and I was going to add to the bibliography. Let's see if I got it here, and then I'm going to wind this up. Yep. No, this ain't the one, but this is one of them. Class Struggle in Hollywood. It's Gerald Horne. Moguls, mobsters, stars, reds, and trade unionists. This ain't the one, but it's one of the ones. The ones I'm looking for is final victim of the blacklist. It may not be in here. It may not be in here. It's not in here. Final victim of the blacklist. But at any rate, Roy Cohn, a lawyer, a nasty peek of the work. Roy Cohn's advice, Roy Cohn's strategy was just sue. Try to bankrupt them. Just sue. Be a nuisance. Be a nuisance. That's what Donald Trump is doing now, except he's doing it from the White House. And he got a shakedown with $1 billion worth of free labor from law firms. And he's going to try to make some of them sue other people. You can't beat these people by trying to accommodate them, by trying to assimilate. You got to punch them dead ass in your face. I'm going to say something that I would never say, but I'll never say it again. Probably, maybe I'll say it one more or two times. And that is, go Crimson. I ain't mad at Harvard. Sue. And guess what, Howard? Guess what, Fisk? Guess what? Southern University, Howard University, Florida A&M University, Southern University Law Center, Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Houston, Texas, North Carolina Central School of Law in Durham, North Carolina, and Miles College in Alabama. We got 6 law schools. Maybe we can come up with a lawsuit too, at least an amicus brief. I'm down. Because you can't win by hiding. If you run toward these people, you're going to see their fear come out and they're going to melt like ice cream on a summer day because they soft like Charmin. But they're not soft if you let them pretend like they hard and like you act like a pillow fight is somehow going to turn into something different. Treat it like what it is. Response of fear, shrunken spirits. Maybe we can overwhelm them with our capacity to love, as Dr. King would say, but I know one thing, we ain't going to get it by shrinking. Trumpism is a barometer of patriotism. Go last week when we were talking about the Smithsonian pronouncements, or 2 weeks ago, and then go back to this whole idea of what it means to attack memory, whether it be the Smithsonian or the National Park Service. We had a 2-day teach-in at Howard this week. Today is the second day. Yesterday, I spoke on the reason why they're trying to shut the Smithsonian, or change them, not shut it, change the Smithsonian and change the National Park Service. Long short of it is they can't and they won't if we do what we need to do. So I'm going to wind up by thanking some people for office hours. Mike Marlin and Andy. The conversation we had on Monday night was fantastic. It really was. Andy used, Szilagis used an analogy from physics, something that he borrowed from a theorist, Adrian Bejan, called constructal theory. Sent me to go look at it. Constructal theory. Constructal theory argues that for a finite flow system, a finite size flow system, self-contained flow system, to persist in time, meaning to live, its configuration must evolve. Its configuration must evolve in such a way that provides easier access to the currents that flow through it. So what does that mean? That means that something, in order for it to live, it's got to continue its flow, which means that whatever is contained within it has to evolve in a way that provides easier access to the currents that's flowing through it. Now, what might that mean? Well, again, when I see President Artis from Benedict College saying that our students have to assimilate, what I hear is, in order for them to live, they're going to have to tap into the current that moves through how they move through the world. I absolutely agree with that, but that doesn't mean assimilation. Again, the Luddites that are talked about in this article in the New Yorker, the ones that are saying we can't stop the future, but we want to continue to be productive. We want to continue to live. That means they're going to have to adapt or die. But if you're going to adapt by assimilating into a system that's ultimately going to make everybody obsolete, that's not adapting. That means your finite flow system is not going to have access to the currents that flow through it. What is the currents that flow through? The societies. It's our common humanity. It's what some people will call the liberal world order, but I wouldn't call it the liberal world order. I think that word is much too small. It's the spirit of generosity. It's the best nature. It's the best impulse in terms of our cultural ways of knowing in all cultures, including what we would call European ones. We have to understand that. So The rule that Andy introduced us to on Monday night in office hours from constructural law, which came because we were discussing and we will continue discussing and finish up this week, Science and Oppression, Jacob Carruthers' article, which is such a powerful little article. Man wrote this in 1971. Here we are in 2025. And I just wish, and I was telling some people after we got off Monday night, that I would love for the members of the Kemetic Institute of Chicago, Jacob Carruthers' home team, the core, and I'm a proud member of the Kemetic Institute as well, along with Mario Beatty and Belethea Watkins. We kind of brought in, even though, at the time Mario and Belethea weren't in Chicago. It's one of the great honors of my life to be saying this, for me to say I'm in KI. But this conversation now, among not just the core of Kemetic Institute, but now thousands of people on a Monday night, every Monday night, oh, it's powerful. So that conversation we were talking about, Andy introduced us to this conceptual law in physics and systems theory. And using that as a metaphor for human social relations, I thought about that all week, Andy. Human societies maybe are like rivers. Rivers flow, shaped by ideologies, nation-state ideologies. But if you're in a polluted river like the United States of America, it may not flow much longer because, again, what's going to pass through it? Well, nation-state ideologies maybe are like riverbeds. Those are the contained places that direct the current of social energy. They want us to direct it toward tanks on the streets of DC during Donald Trump's birthday and back again on the 4th of July. They want us to direct it toward a garden of statues with crazy ass statues that you taking money from education and gonna build your statue garden. They want us to go through those riverbeds that they want to channel for themselves. And we're fighting that. We're fighting them carving riverbeds. We're going to fight them in the courts. That's what these attorneys general are doing in these states that are pushing back against this K-12 mess. That's what Harvard is doing. That's what the NAACP Legal Defense Fund with the NAACP is doing now. Pushing back. We're not going to carve this riverbed out, you damn fool. Liberal democracies are maybe like deltas. See, they're wide branching networks that evolve to let every tributary find its own path, optimizing flow through freedom and adaptability. Meaning what? When Dr. King stands up and says this, we're in a society where I can imagine one day living in a society where you won't be judged by the color of your skin and the content of your character. Here comes John Roberts. See, he's colorblind. No, fool. What he's saying is that the lesson he learned at Ebenezer Baptist Church was all black is one you should learn. Where did you go to church? Or are you even a Christian? I see the crucifix around your neck, but clearly you ain't learned what he learned from his mom and daddy on Auburn Avenue. What he is saying is, I want to live in a society where my way of knowing becomes the standard, not the color of my skin. Don't be dense, or be dense, because we're going to roll over you like the sea, because what you're going to find out is that the current that animates the flow is not white supremacy, is not nativism, is not the moats around the mosaic of fortresses, but the cultures of generosity. So maybe in every case we can think about systems that survive. The human systems that survive are the ones that evolve their channels to reduce resistance, to reduce nativism, to sustain the current, not the ones that hold it back. And so we talk about, finally, as we bring this to a close, liberation beyond the nation, beyond the nation state. When we talk about fighting black, look at how African people have resisted oppression in the last half millennium. And what you'll find is we have not been most successful when we turn inward to the nativisms of where we found ourselves. We have been the most successful when we move the other way. That's the generosity. That's the generosity that I see on the train every day, or the bus, or walking in the car back and forth. That's the generosity I saw when I was coming back. I'm roaming through all the bookstores and thrift shops. I'm looking for stuff, and I found a book, Prophets and Clothes, that I'm gonna get up and show y'all. No, I'm not going to. I'm not gonna do it because the book is so rare. I think I paid $5 for it. No, I paid $20 for this book, but I would have paid a lot more because, anyway, my point is this: I'm on the train reading the book, like, man, I can't believe I found this book. But of course I can believe it, because I absolutely know every piece of paper y'all see around here, and the vast majority that you don't, because it's in storage. Every single one of them pages was guided by an ancestral hand. That's the current that flows through all of us. You just got to recognize it. And I saw this brother, we caught eyes. He was getting off the train. I was just reading on the train. I looked up, he looked at me. I don't know that man. I'll probably never see him again. It was like, kept going. What is that nod? That nod is not American. That nod is not nativism. That nod bespeaks a kinship stronger than patriotism. That bond was forged through common experience. What it means to be black, a bond formed in oppression in part, but maintained by culture, one that is not naturally aligned to a flag or to a country, but to a shared experience and an ancestral connection, one that in order to persist over time, if we're going to follow that law of physics, must evolve in a way that provides easier access to the currents that flow through it. So when this man gets on television, or when Lil Narco gets on television talking about what they're going to do to Africa, and then Congo, the Congolese came here because they already robbed them of all their minerals, and y'all stand up, somebody says, yeah, because America needs to be in charge, you have now blocked your flow. You know what you've ensured? You've ensured that you are going to die because you are cut off from the current that flows through all of us. And we can't let that happen. So I'll stop you.
The life flow, the life blood, the life water, the living water.
There it is.
Love it. I love it. And I thank you, Paul Quinn, George Washington Carver, Dr. Carr. Find your thing. Find your thing.
Find your thing.
And maybe in that river, you know, the beavers would direct the flow of the rivers to feed the people.
Oh, I love that. Yes. See how that metaphor? Hey, thanks, Andy. Wow. Right. That's it.
And they killed the beavers here to make hats in England.
Lord have mercy.
It messed up the whole food supply for the indigenous folk. You know,
that's exactly right.
Human beings. Let's not be a hindrance. Let's
because ultimately that means that we die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Woo.
I love it.
Let me get out of here because you gotta get your mind right.
I gotta do a little radio show. I'll see you.
Yeah, okay, little radio show. Love you.
Love you too.
See y'all Monday night. All right, peace.
Bye, Dr.
Bye. See you, Rob.